Hello Internet, my name is Brink and welcome to my channel. So, consequences. That's the real big thing I want to talk about with this Diablo expansion. Because honestly, this expansion has a lot of them. It's been like a month now since the expansion dropped. And I wanted to wait a bit before talking about it. Just to really sit with the game first. Because my feelings about Diablo 4 has changed quite a bit. I've actually been more engaged than I expected. Normally around this point, I'd already be done. And trust me on this one, it's not for the lack of trying. I wanted Diablo to be a good game for a long time now. So like I said, normally around this point, I would have quit. Felt like I'd seen enough. But this time, I keep logging back in, day after day. Which genuinely surprised me. Now, do I think this game is going to stay interesting for another month? Probably not. But the important thing is, it's definitely in a better place than it used to be. Maybe that's because of the leaderboards. Maybe war plans are finally pushing the endgame in the right direction. I don't think they're fully there yet, but something has changed, so let's talk about it. I kinda want to go through this in order. So, the new classes, leveling, progression and gearing, endgame systems, the cash shop, we gotta talk about the cash shop, and overall casual versus hardcore experience. So first, the Paladin. The Paladin is strong. Really strong. And visually, Blizzard absolutely nailed it. The armor, the sound design, the effects. Honestly, at times it feels like Blizzard at their best again. But gameplay wise, during leveling it was a blast. But at the end game is where things started falling apart for me a little. Because I like complexity in these games. I like layers, synergies, build depth. That feeling where, even after hours of playing, you still feel like there's more to discover. And with the Paladin, I just didn't really get that feeling. It felt a bit one-dimensional. There are Paladin builds out there where you just literally press one button. One button. I even saw a guide recently where one of the listed weaknesses was requires more than one button. What? And I just sat there thinking, wait, that's a weakness? Now maybe that's the WoW player in me talking. I'm used to an action bar with 24 abilities, managing cooldowns, fast interrupts. But many people are loving it. It seems this is what a big group of gamers want. I just don't get it. You're running through a dungeon where everything instantly drops dead around you. Surely I can see it can be fun for a while. Because it makes you feel real powerful. But you got to recognize, after a while it gets boring real fast. You're just clicking through the areas. So for me, that's where the fun starts to disappear. The Paladin looks and feels amazing. But you just have to look at Path of Exile to see how they do class depth. To realize Blizzard could have done a better job. Now that's just my opinion. Now I will admit, there are probably more builds out there that I haven't tried, so I don't want to be too harsh on it, but it felt like a Zerg class pretty much. That said, I actually think it's a great class for newer players. I can totally get why people like it, and it's probably one of the best entry classes they've ever made, and I do think the Paladin is a great addition to Diablo. Now, the Warlock. Honestly, the Warlock did not disappoint. I've played a lot of Warlock in WoW over the years, so I was really excited. But when I saw the trailer, it looked so different from what I was used to. So I wasn't sure if I was going to like this class. But that feeling dropped pretty fast while leveling. I discovered Dreadclaws, a spell that looks pretty dope if you ask me. And at the end game, again, not all builds are my cup of tea. But the good part is, there's enough customization there that I'm sure that you can actually find a playstyle that's to your liking. And because of that variety, I ended up finding abilities I genuinely enjoyed using all the way into the end game, which is important for me. One build in particular, like I said, Dreadclaws. I absolutely loved visually. That ability just looks insane, and thankfully it actually performed really well too. So whenever I try to make a build, I always look for skills that flow and feel good to cast, and I can recognize that Blizzard can do some improvements left and right. Not everything works, because if you do build the Warlock wrong, it can feel pretty clunky and just odd at times. For instance, when I tried a more melee variant, where my Dreadclaws changed in a big circle around me, it performed better than the ranged version. And the teleporting, or better said, the nether stepping into packs, made way more sense to me. And I love the fact that you can summon a single target turret or other demons for more AoE damage. Or having lesser demons and sacrificing them to empower greater demons, it has that bit of a demonology Warlock feel. Now after playing the Paladin, the Warlock and Spiritborn before this, I fully expected the Warlock to be just as overpowered as the Paladin. But surprisingly, the Warlock actually felt pretty balanced. I even had to lower the difficulty a few times during boss fights. And honestly, I think that was a good thing. because when I played the Paladin, I was basically steamrolling everything. Bosses melted instantly, mechanics barely mattered, and after a while you kinda realize you're skipping half of the actual gameplay. But with the Warlock, fights lasted longer, mechanics mattered more, boss phases actually existed, and honestly, I found that way more engaging. And this is where the casual versus hardcore mindset starts showing up already. Because if you watch optimization guides, they'll usually tell you, don't play the hardest difficulty. Play the difficulty, you're still one-shotting everything. Fastest XP per hour, fastest efficiency. And this is where I personally think optimization can ruin the fun a little. Because then people turn around and say, the game is too easy. Meanwhile, they optimized all the challenge out of the game themselves. Personally, I'd rather find that middle ground. The hardest difficulty where I'm not getting instantly deleted, but enemies still feel dangerous, mechanics still matter, and I actually have to pay attention. Because after years of playing MMOs and action RPGs, I kinda realized something. The journey is the fun. And playing on this harder difficulty made me appreciate the game way more. And honestly, the boss fights might be the best thing Diablo 4 has right now. Some of these encounters are genuinely fantastic. The mechanics get pretty crazy at times. At its peak, this expansion brings one of my favorite boss fights in the entire Diablo franchise. Because visually, the fight communicates everything so clearly. You understand what's dangerous, what to avoid, where to move, even at your first attempt. And when you fail, you go again. You learn something, you improve. Those fights are just fun to play. Now talking about movement, I still think PoE 2 handles movement a little better. Which is funny because this game actually feels slower overall, but their dodge roll system feels more tactical, more intentional. In Diablo, your dash mostly feels like repositioning, movement speed, but in PoE 2, the dodge roll feels defensive, like a real mechanic. Especially because it cancels animations. And there were definitely moments in Diablo where I rather would have had the dodge roll. The dash kinda felt like you're stuck on a rock, but there was no rock, if you catch my drift. Now, without going into spoilers, the campaign honestly surprised me too. From the moment we arrived on the new island, I was hooked. And weirdly enough, one of the moments that stood out to me the most was actually the boat ride there. It's such a small section. You're only on that ship for like 5 minutes, but Blizzard crafted that moment so well. Especially compared to some older sections in Diablo, where you spend hours in one environment. This voyage was short, but memorable. Honestly, I kinda wanted to keep that boat. And once you finally arrive at the harbor, in this new capital, the story immediately picks up again. It doesn't take long before it throws some memorable moments at you. Traveling through this ancient Greek-inspired world, discovering new locations and slowly uncovering what happened there, made the journey feel way more immersive than I expected. Well, I'll leave the story there, because I really want to keep this as spoiler-free as possible. Let's just say it had some cinematic storytelling. And I had a really good time living through this campaign. I genuinely wouldn't mind replaying it on another class, which for me says a lot. Because normally once I finished a campaign in an MMO or ARPG, I'm pretty much done with it. Now about this new island, I really do like what they did with the place. The Greek-inspired atmosphere, different biomes and some mystical locations. Overall, it had a good vibe that fits Diablo and the storytelling surprisingly well. I enjoyed exploring this area way more than the original world, which is probably my second biggest grief, because Diablo's open world never fully clicked for me. Visually, it looks fantastic, but I never really felt connected to it. It felt like it was a world with no identity, no soul. This new zone feels different though. More memorable, more focused, and just easier to enjoy moment to moment. And most of that connection comes from the campaign. Now, I do think that the game respects your time way more. As a gamer dad, I'm perfectly happy spending less time riding my mount, teleporting to important locations, and providing me more time to actually play the game. Now with this expansion, the flow feels much better. You're constantly moving between activities and returning to the new capital city, which honestly is super convenient. Its layout, all the important systems are close together. Everything feels streamlined. And after hundreds of hours in these games, convenience actually matters a lot. Now let's talk about the endgame, because let's be real here. Diablo 4 endgame wasn't exactly amazing before this expansion either. So now we've got improved crafting, the cube's insanity, and diverse war plans, and all these new progression systems, which are supposed to carry the game long term. Before this expansion, after hitting max level, the game felt sandboxy in its nature. Sure, the seasonal tab gave you guidance, but overall, the game did a pretty poor job telling players what they actually should be doing. So naturally, the game has optimized the fun out of it. We found the fastest activity and spammed it endlessly. Hell tides, pit runs, whatever gave the best rewards per hour. And that's where the game usually lost me, because after a while, usually even within a week, it stopped feeling like progression and started feeling like repetition. Sure, technically you could do nightmare dungeons, or lair bosses, or Undercity, but as a newer or casual player, you had no idea if you were actually progressing or not. You were spamming activities and hoping that the drops would suit you. You just wanted better gear, more power, higher torment levels. But the game never really painted a clear picture on how to get there. And Warplans did change that for me. Because one thing I actually liked about Diablo 3 was the linear sense of progression. You always kinda knew, okay, this is what I should be doing next. And Warplans finally brings some of that structure back. Not in a restrictive way, but in a guiding way, and adding efficiency towards certain goals. Don't get me wrong, you can still do whatever you want, it's up to you. If you enjoy the sandbox approach, that's still there. But now the game does give you more direction. Mix in nightmare dungeons with your pit runs, hell tides, bosses, whispers, Undercity. And suddenly the game loop feels healthier. You're not just spamming one activity for 10 hours straight. You now know why you're doing these activities and how they will benefit you. And honestly, that alone just makes the game way more enjoyable for me. Now let's talk about complexity for a second, because I already know what the Path of Exile crowd is going to say. Diablo is for casuals, Path of Exile 2 is the real hardcore ARPG. And even though this is the case, I for one like playing both these games, but for different reasons. And looking at it from a more new perspective, Diablo 4 already has way more systems than people pretend it does. I will admit, I was constantly tabbing to my second screen, figuring out how the cube works, how to craft gear, what masterworking is, and how to optimize your Paragon board. There's actually a lot going on there, and from a new player's perspective, it can absolutely feel overwhelming. The game explains things really poorly at times. It does try. You'll get a tiny pop-up, a short quest, maybe a text box. Or when you hover over your mats, it shows you where to get it from. But suddenly the game expects you to understand an entire progression system. And every season, a new system gets layered on top of that. And I get it, the game needs it, because once you get how it works, you start feeling the joy of progressing. Because eventually, it will start to click. And honestly, the cube is what made it click for me. That moment where you start building an item from scratch, adjusting affixes, adding legendary powers, socketing gear and fine-tuning with enchanting, then maximizing it with masterworking, slowly understanding how everything connects. That was the moment Diablo systems finally started making sense to me. And maybe I'm getting older and have a less flexible mindset, but I really don't think the game needs more complexity. I think it already has enough layers. The real issue isn't the lack of systems, it's variety in gameplay if you ask me. Because eventually, you'll still start repeating the same activities on the same maps over and over and over again. But overall, the endgame is absolutely in the best state it's ever been. I'm 4 weeks deep right now, and I still want to log in every day. That honestly surprised me. Now, do I think this keeps me engaged forever? Probably not. Because eventually, once you hit the highest torment levels, like I said, you're still repeating content just more efficiently. And probably that's where competition helps. Because if you are into ARPGs, you probably already see the latest Path of Exile 2 patch and its insane new approach to endgame. Well, Blizzard definitely has some real competition on their hands. And that's good for us gamers. Now we have options. If one game gets stale or too repetitive, we jump ship for a while and come back later. Let these studios compete, let them innovate. That's how better games get made. Now, unfortunately, we need to talk about the cash shop, because this is probably my biggest disappointment with this game. The cash shop is the biggest letdown for me. Let truth be told, it's a massive difference between the rewards you earn in-game versus the stuff Blizzard sells you directly. Now look, I'm not new to monetization systems. I play World of Warcraft. I know how this works. But this is already a $40 expansion, and on top of that, you're paying for seasonal passes, bonus tracks, cosmetics, and somehow the armor you earn in-game still doesn't look nearly as cool as the cash shop stuff. Even the seasonal gear that you paid for extra gets outshined by the shop sets. And honestly, that's probably my biggest gripe of this game right now. The difference in quality is huge. Because I remember Blizzard saying, don't worry, the in-game sets will look just as amazing. But right now, that really doesn't feel true. Up until now, I actually stood my ground. I refused to spend $25 on a cosmetic set. Because honestly, that kind of money for one set, for one class, is insane. But then Blizzard unleashed the Kraken. They added these insanely high quality, WoW-inspired armor sets into Diablo. And yeah, as a WoW fanboy, I caved. Almost instantly. I had to have them. Especially because the bundle worked across multiple classes. And that was probably the final push. And to be honest, I don't even regret buying them. The sets just look amazing. They'll probably stay my transmogs for a very long time. Especially now I'm playing a version of Diablo that I'm enjoying way more than I expected. At least that's what I tell myself to justify the purchase. And look, this is just modern gaming now. Companies make money through cosmetics. That's probably not going to change anytime soon. And technically, the Diablo shop isn't pay to win, it's all visual. No power advantages, no stat boosts. But with that said, I still think that Blizzard needs to reward players better in game. Because at this point, many of us have spent well over $100 on Diablo right now. The base game, expansion, passes, maybe some cosmetics, it all adds up fast. So yeah, I absolutely think the game should have cooler mounts, crazier armor, glowy cosmetics, aspirational rewards, and better looking weapons that players can actually earn through gameplay. Not just one cool helmet that we can earn by doing a community goal. Because right now, cooler stuff almost always comes from your credit card, and that definitely needs to improve. And finally, casual versus hardcore experience. Because honestly, this is where Diablo surprised me the most. I'm older now. I got less free time than I used to. And because of that, I really appreciate how flexible Diablo 4 feels right now. You can log in for an hour, run some activities, get upgrades, make progress. Then log out feeling like your time actually mattered. The game is way better at that now than it was before at launch. And I even feel like I have a shot at climbing those leaderboards, even as a filthy casual. Yes, it will take me longer into the season. And to achieve this, do I still need build guides? Yeah, yes I do. They know this game inside out and come with way better builds than I could. But one thing I did learn is that those builds aren't carved in stone. The game throws different gear at you, different affixes, different combinations. And even while following a guide, you still have room to experiment. And that part was super enjoyable for me. Meanwhile, hardcore players still have plenty to chase. Perfect gear, min-maxing, speed farming, greater affix hunting, leaderboards, alternative builds. There's still a massive rabbit hole there, if you want to dedicate your life to it. And I think that's the sweet spot Blizzard needed to hit. Now, will hardcore streamers eventually complain there's not enough content? Yeah, of course they will. If you play 14 hours a day, for 3 straight weeks, eventually any game runs out of content. But let's be brutally honest, that's really not my problem. Not as a dad gamer it is. Do I think the game could use more variety? Absolutely. More diverse activities, more map variety, more long-term replayability. And hopefully Blizzard keeps learning from other ARPGs in the genre. But for me personally, I've got a game here that I can enjoy. It feels like a solid base now for Blizzard to expand on, over multiple seasons, across different classes, while still learning new things every week. And honestly, that's exactly what I wanted from an ARPG nowadays. So for me, this expansion was worth the money. So to round things up, if this is the more casual ARPG, then I'm totally okay with that, because the game is approachable, rewarding, flexible, but still deep enough to overwhelm newer players at times. And for me personally, this is probably the most fun I've ever had in Diablo for a very long time. I genuinely didn't expect to be playing this actively after 4 weeks, but here I am. I'm still logging in every day, still wanting more. And the class overall is a huge reason why. I already wanted to try more builds, more characters, more playstyles, and that is probably the biggest compliment I can give this expansion. Anyway, let me know your thoughts below, and thanks for watching. Brinks out.